My colleague Neha Bothra is also joining us from the newsroom. She tracks the space very closely. Neha, you've also gone through the revised circular or the new circular and may have spoken to a lot of industry experts. What are your thoughts and what are the details you are gathering?
Ajay, it's an entire overhaul as far as the restructuring tools are concerned. In fact, last night I think it was a seismic change for bankers who are trying to get a closer understanding of how they will implement these. Because do remember, so far bankers have relied very heavily on about half a dozen restructuring tools like CDR, SDR, S4A. Now there was a lot of criticism about these tools, to be sure. For instance, SDR was considered to be a band-aid mechanism, not really tackling the root of the problem. CDR was considered to be one manner in which loans were evergreened. So yes, there was some concern about the effectiveness of these tools, but overnight RBI has brought in a system wherein all these tools are going to be scrapped and bankers will have to depend only on the IBC route. Now the IBC route is yet to stabilize. We haven't seen any of the big ticket accounts so far see complete resolution. So there's a lot of uncertainty on that part. While they are more familiar with the rules, the implementation part still needs to be clearer, and this is something that one would not say very confidently is on stable ground. So at this juncture, when the Reserve Bank of India has scanned about all the trusted, even if proved to be ineffective restructuring tools, IBC as the sole mechanism is something that bankers will still have to try and understand how best they could use. In fact, I've been interacting with bankers and even some experts who've been tracking the banking space very closely, and they feel that, in fact, to quote one person who said that the banking industry at this juncture has been brought down to its knees. In fact, some people were very gloomy about it, saying that the overall big picture indicated a very gloomy situation for public sector banks. But I will leave it at that because we have the captains of leading public sector banks, and I will come straight to them to get their view on what they feel about the revised tools that the Reserve Bank of India has come out with in the circular issued late last night. Coming to you, Mr. Rao, first. You did go through the rules, and now you understand that no longer can you depend on 525, CDR, SDR, or S4A, that were the more commonly used restructuring tools available to banks. Your first thoughts on how effectively you think you can fall back on IBC, considering that you work with a 180-day mechanism framework, and you will have to resolve many big-ticket loans during that time frame. What are your initial concerns?
Yeah. Question is to me?
Question is to you, Mr. Rao.
Okay, I'm Mr. Rai. I'm a bit confused. Okay.
Mr. Rai, the question is to you. How concerned are you about the rules that Reserve Bank of India has clarified at this point? How hesitant are you about the implementation of these rules?
Yeah, good afternoon. See, actually, we need to understand the background. Right now, what problem we are facing is because of bunching of issues, because of a lot of restructuring and different schemes coming in, trying to understand the exact problem which is inherent in these corporates. I think we have wasted a lot of time, and ultimately in the last 1.5 years, the bunching of the problem has happened. So what the regulator is really looking at is the next cycle, so that we have a better mechanism to handle issues. So it is very futuristic. But then temporarily these guidelines are going to create problem, because now at SMA 0 level, that is a 30 days default, we need to start looking at these accounts from the restructuring perspectives. So we have only 180 days. I think bankers have to get their act together, so that within 180 days either you come with a proper resolution plan or you get into NCLT. Now we need to understand NCLT is not a solution for recovery. NCLT is a resolution plan. So I think with the kind of experience, the bankers, if the corporate is good enough and if it is going through only temporary issues, then I think it's better to help the corporate to come out of the issues by doing some restructuring or helping them in other ways. If that is not possible, then the Reserve Bank is very clear, you need to take it to NCLT. So I think we need to understand the mind of the regulator and act accordingly and set right the things. Yes, temporarily for next few months, few quarters, we'll have some issues. But then I think gradually it will stabilize, and I think we'll be following the best practices in the banking industry.
Right. Mr. Bajaj, I'll take the point forward and come to you with my next question. That is about the JLF. For very long, the Joint Lenders Forum is something that bankers have depended on. In fact, there's been much to and fro. There have been complaints about not having majority consensus within the JLF. But now that the JLF has totally been disbanded, how do you think the lenders will cope with the situation? Because do remember, we have a situation where we have a consortium of lenders who've lent to a big corporate entity. How will they go about now independently framing resolution plan? Because do remember, earlier the bankers were working as a consortium. Now when they are working as individuals, how practical will the implementation be when the JLF ceases to exist?
See, basically, as far as the circular means new circular, I have gone through that. Now even there is a default with one bank itself that the matter is to be reported and the resolution process is to be done. So I think that earlier process of under JLF, that majority decision will take place and then only things will start happening. And in some of the cases, some banks, they don't fall in line with the majority decision. It takes its own time. Now with this, that even means if there is a default with one bank itself and matter is reported and that resolution process is to be done within the time frame given by the new rules. So I think things will start happening fast, and this NPA recognition and resolution to that will take place in a faster way, and more so even borrower entities, they will come to know, yes, now it is not the earlier time that you can take shelter under SDR S4A and get time off. And as you have seen, our past experience is hardly anything have happened in those cases. Only it gives us the time to recognize and make provision for those kind of account. But now things will settle much faster, and if it's not happening RP, then it has to go under IBA process, and again it is a 180 days matter plus whatever extension 90 days within the time frame. Only thing we have to see, if we are following this IBC pattern, whether banks are going to get the recovery or not in a, because whatever right now cases have been referred, we are seeing that resolution may take place only at 80% haircut or around that. That thing we have to see, and since it's a new process, I think time will tell, and it will basically, in my opinion, quicken the process of resolution.
Right, time will tell how effective the new norms are. But coming to you, Mr. Mahapatra, at this juncture, banks like yours are dealing with severe capital constraints. In fact, I remember you mentioned yesterday that the growth of your domestic and international loan book had been curtailed because of conservation of capital. I've been interacting with a lot of analysts about how these rules will pan out for banks, particularly public sector banks. Do help us understand what it means for banks like yours in terms of provisioning, because there have been concerns about inflated provisioning going forward. And now with these rules, when you have to directly resort to referring the case to IBC under NCLT norms within 180 days, what kind of buffer do you really have in terms of your capital base as of now?
You know, Bank of India is one of the banks which has covered already 67% of their NPAs. So we started recognizing our assets very early. As a result, we have already covered 67% of our existing NPAs. And sometimes what was happening, some borrowers, they are taking shelter under some scheme or other, and it was, delayed. The process was delayed. Now, what they say, you can go for restructuring. Restructuring is allowed. But the moment you restructure, account should be downgraded. That is the best practice in international economies. In all advanced economies, they do. I was heading Hong Kong operations, I was heading Singapore operations. I have seen how they manage. They are in better position. Because the moment you downgrade the moment you go for restructuring, you have to downgrade it. But doesn't mean that it is over. But once it is downgraded, the entire plan will be worked out. and then accordingly timeline will be set, and the borrower also will show interest and skin in the timeline, and everything will be taken care. If at the end of the time frame, if it's not happening, then automatically it will go to IBC. So if it is restructured, it should be downgraded. Everybody should show their skin. No borrower, suppose what is happening in all these cases, once it is under S4A or SDR, as if it is the role of the banker. Borrower was not showing, any interest. No, everything bank has to provide, bank has to take care of additional requirement. Now they have to be more serious. If you see, once the IBC was changed, the defaulters cannot participate in bidding. Now many of the promoters are very serious about preventing the account going to the NCLT. That means everybody will be showing their interest. All stakeholders will be interested. It will be good for the borrower, good for the banker, good for the country. It's a very good initiative. It will help everybody to be serious and show their skin and put their additional effort so that things are corrected in time. Instead of waiting for delaying the process and at the end of the day you are helpless to manage your asset, better to start, recognize early and address the issue early. That is a very good step and perfectly in sync with the advanced economies, and it will definitely help all the stakeholders, bankers, promoters, government, regulator, everybody will be benefited by this scheme.
Mr. Mahapatra, thank you so much for sharing your views. Thank you, Mr. Rai. Thank you, Mr. Bajaj, for joining us on this show and sharing with us your perspective on how the recently introduced circular by Reserve Bank of India last night will impact banks. Thank you very much for joining us. So clearly, Ajay, it's a thumbs up as far as banks are concerned. They seem to suggest that the current framework presented in the circular will benefit all stakeholders involved, but clearly time will tell. We'll watch out for more developments in this space. Sending it back to you, Ajay.